Hi, well, welcome everybody. My name is Megan Duquette. I'm California ReLeaf's Education and Communications Program Manager. And I'm so pleased to see you all joining us today for our educational webinar, Budgeting for Tree Care Success, with our guest speaker, Doug Wildman. Before we begin this morning, I wanted to just go over a few housekeeping related items and what you can expect today from our webinar. First, I wanted to let you know that we will be recording the webinar, and we will make it available for everyone on our YouTube channel as well as californiarelief.org. So please do check back with us, and we will also send out the link following the presentation, so you can share it with a colleague or friend as well. The presentation is going to last about 40 minutes. And we're going to have a question and answer time following the presentation. So as you go along, if you think of a question, you can put it in the chat as we go, or you can wait to the end and then place your question in the chat. California ReLeaf's newest staff member, Alex Bink, who is our tree inventory tech support manager, will be helping with that question and answer period later on during the presentation. So thank you, Alex, for doing that for us today. And we also encourage you to rename yourself, and you can do that easily by hovering your cursor over your box or your name. In the upper right hand corners, there's 3 dots, and then you can select rename yourself and then type in your name and the organization you're with. And then the last thing is our last housekeeping item is that we ask that you mute yourself during the presentation as to not distract from our speaker today. And then before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about California ReLeaf in case you are unfamiliar with our organization. We are a statewide nonprofit based out of Sacramento. We were founded in 1989, and our mission is to support grassroots efforts and build strategic partnerships that protect, enhance, and grow California's urban and community forests. We have 4 basic program areas. We support the California ReLeaf Network, which consists of more than 80 urban forest nonprofits and community groups from all over California, from as far north as Eureka to as far south as San Diego, and they all vary in size and programs and regions. And I just wanted to give a big shout out to all of our network members who are on the call today. You inspire us, so thank you for being here. Our second program area is to provide pass-through grants for urban tree planting projects, and we work to engage new grassroots community groups in tree planting efforts. And so stay tuned for upcoming pass-through programs. Our small grant program will be releasing application information later this fall. And if you haven't already done so, we always recommend that you stay up to date with everything that's going on at California ReLeaf by joining our email list. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now for you all, so you can have access to our email list. And then I wanted to also let you know our third program area is advocacy. We do advocacy for urban forestry related issues at the state level and do what we can to provide resources to community groups who are advocating for trees in their community. And lastly, our fourth area is educational programming, which includes webinars like what we're doing today with our Budgeting for Tree Care Success with our guest speaker, Doug Wildman. So let me introduce you to Doug, and I'll let him take over. Doug graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a degree in landscape architecture. Doug holds a landscape architecture license and ISA arborist certification. He's also a tree risk assessment qualified and holds an urban forester certification. He's also a Bay-friendly qualified landscape design professional. Doug has served on the executive board and president of both the California Urban Forest Council and Western Chapter ISA. Doug worked for 20 years with a nonprofit tree planting organization in San Francisco on programs to improve San Francisco's urban forests and to help bond neighborhoods through community urban forestry. Currently, Doug works as a consulting arborist and landscape architect in San Francisco Bay Area. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Doug. Thank you so much for being here, Doug. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, great to be here, and thanks for inviting me. I have made a few budgets and worked on a lot of different programs over time. and also as a landscape architect, put together a lot of budgets for clients wanting to know before the working drawings are done what their project will cost. So doing takeoffs on landscapes and irrigation and such. So I've done a lot of work that way. So I think today, hope to cover what you all are looking for. And so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, that would be this guy. Here we go. So welcome. I'm glad so many of you are here. Yeah, this is recorded. And so if any staff, you might want to turn them on to this later, that would be great. Budgeting for tree care success, there's a lot to it. But when it comes down to it, we look towards that success. That's what keeps us going. Our trees getting big out there in the streets and in parks. So we've seen those successes. And well, how can a budget actually affect your organization's tree care success? So I believe that tree care success is based in your tree planting success. Now, if your trees aren't going to make it, your tree care success is going to be a challenge, isn't it? So plan for post-planting care of your each tree planting. And so a solid budget is that plan that drives your planting and tree care success. It's important to understand your organization, why they exist. Know your mission statement. Stay on target with your funding that you seek. There are a lot of different funds out there, but if there are funds that are directly related to what you do, that makes sense. There are times also when this funding can grow and improve your programs. So look, I would always look that direction, that they're supplementing, they're improving, they're making you reach. And the end game really is the right species planted in the right place, maintained properly, equal the healthy trees that we want and the happy communities that we live in. So we have a few polling questions. I'd love your responses to these pretty quickly. The first one, polling question 1, how would you best classify your position? Are you an executive director or owner, a programs director, or in charge of a single program within your org, or an administrator or other? If you go ahead and sort of click the one that applies, that'd be great.
Doug, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. I'm gonna have to skip our first one. There's a technical difficulty with the poll, but we'll have it fixed in the next slide. So for folks to put that in the chat would be really helpful, and we'll fix that in just a moment.
Cool. Cool. Everyone's getting oriented to where the chat is and at the bottom of the page. There it is. Good. Thanks for taking a look at that. Let's see. Just give it another minute here. I guess it is interesting to see what folks are doing, and I think it's important for, even if you're you know, you're not an executive director or program director, if you're on the ground planting trees, I think knowing about budgets is really important. I'm hoping there are a lot of folks here on that page. So let's close it out, Megan, in just a snapshot of in the chat. I can't see the chats with my screen. Show
Yeah, Doug,
chat.
this is Victoria. I would say we have a lot of program people here today.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay, folks, that sounds great. Good. Well, let's go on to the next one here. So polling question 2. What do you do in your organization? And you would select any and all that apply. Do you write grants, invoice grants, or you direct, lead, train staff in a planting program? You drink coffee and take staff and volunteers out for adult beverages after work. I don't know, or other, you could enter other, I guess since the chat is sort of open, maybe we could put it in there too. So a lot of program people, that's great. Yeah, I do believe that if you understand a budget, then you're really working within your organization in a way that is so helpful.
So a lot of people are writing that they write grants or seeking grants, or do all the first 3.
There you go. Up there, skipping the 4th one. Okay. Well, great. That's good. I'm glad you're here. Okay. Thank you, Megan. So when it comes down to it, you really want to understand what keeps the lights on in your organization, what it takes. So there are a lot of fixed expenses that come through your organization every month, regardless of the work that comes in or the work that you do, or the income that comes in. So rent, utilities, internet service, cell phone, landlines, and insurances, all sorts of insurances. Vehicles, and including gas is in there. So also we look at these often as indirect costs, at least in our grants, they're indirect costs. Polling question number 3. Before I even start, what is the most difficult budgeting item or items that you've had to deal with over time? So knowing what your organization's income will look like year to year, that's always a challenge. You're estimating. Pricing materials and services, are you able to price them accurately with inflation? Another is having clarity about each planting site to determine the best watering methods. How are you going to water those trees in that remote corner of the park, in that open space? So, and other, if there's something unique there, go ahead and put that in the chat. Is this one up and running, Nick?
Unfortunately, I'm still having technical difficulties. If people could put it in the chat, I'd appreciate
Okay,
their answer.
okay.
So a lot
That's
of
great.
people are talking about watering, and number 1, looking at year-to-year income. A lot of people are putting that.
Yeah, it's
Some
a
are
hard
putting
one
all
not
of
to
the
check.
above. Yeah.
Money is always the one that, what do you need? Money. Okay. So yeah, year to year, it is so hard to forecast different grants, forecast donations, forecast those income lines. So we'll take a look at that too. Okay, so watering as well. Yeah, watering is a challenge, really understanding the site enough to plan for watering. Okay, thank you. In each neighborhood that you plant trees in, there are parks, sites you're planting in, schools, natural areas, individual residences, commercial sites, fairgrounds, and native peoples' lands. So very different spaces to consider. And it's important that you consider the community that you're planting and you're proposing these trees that you're planting. So questions might be, are these new neighborhoods to your organizations? Have you planted in them before? And what will your outreach program look like? This is part of the planning and the budgeting. So some considerations are really, you're looking at the staff positions to do the work. And you need 2 planning managers, a tree care person, and an outreach person full-time to get you all those plantings that you're scheduling to do whatever it is. Now, the other thing is really engaging with communities to enhance and promote their needs. I think this is really something that can be forgotten. An example of this, a few years ago, we had a tree nursery in a community housing site. And that nursery often was worked, we hired kids from the community to water trees and take care of them. Going to their monthly meetings, the community had monthly meetings where they would invite different programs to speak and share about what they're working on. They'd even have the police chief come in and share different things. And so even if you don't have anything to say, to be in attendance to these meetings and become aware of what problems, issues, or concerns the neighbors have, those are very important meetings to attend. So just something to think about. So understanding your planning sites and how they're managed. Now, we talked about the different sites, parks and such. So really, an example would be if the parks department has lawnmowers, ride-on mowers that are, I don't know, 6 feet wide, and you're putting trees right on the edge of a landscape area, and they can't make their pass with their lawnmower. They need to plan for this, and you need to work with them, the grounds crews and the management, before you're planting trees. Obviously, you're not going to just pop in trees in the ground. And this, on the maintenance end, is still something very important to schools as well, because of how each entity maintains their sites, their landscapes, trees. So individual residences as well and commercial sites. So understand how they manage them and how they maintain them. So dream and build on paper your ideal tree planting program and tree care program. So many grants are actually funding so many expenses that they didn't used to fund. And I think taking advantage of that is important, and really build your dreams. So it is this budgeting process that builds and realizes your dream program. You know, what do you really want? What do you really want out of your program? So back to planting success and getting down to the nitty-gritty detail, you really want to know the staff, who will be on the ground working, and think again in terms of positions, not names, not Sydney or Ralph, but the individual position. And materials are really the what and the where, and dictated by the site conditions. Tools are kind of the how. Depending on the scale of your planting, how many tools will you need? How many volunteers are out there in need of tools? And then services is the how, because as an organization, you need to really consider, can you do it yourselves? Or do you need some outside help? And some of these funders can fund some services. And so if you're a small org and you really need help to install things, there are ways to get it done. So numbers and lines and dates and date ranges and categories and program, it gets crazy. There's so many numbers out there, but really let's just look at some basic numbers where you have income against expense. So in blue is income, expense is yellow, and green down there is profit or loss, because you know yellow and blue make green. That's the idea. So if you look at income, you have local government grants, hopefully, and you have statewide grants, perhaps. You might have federal grants if you're lucky. They're out there, but also earned income. The idea of earned income is that you might have a fee for service where you're actually charging market rate for planting trees. Say it's a commercial site, and you're not going to use your grant money to plant them. Maybe save it for other neighborhoods. Have them pay the full ride. So you're anticipating income, for instance, in that category of $35,000 out of earned income, fee for service, but for a total of $285,000 is what you're looking at income. Now expense, you look under the yellow, you have tools and tree care tools, other. You also have volunteer program. Don't forget that you want to support your volunteer program in every department you have, whether it's making sure they have gloves and shirts and sweatshirts and sandwiches at the end of a big day, whatever it is. Don't forget it. You also have the basic program expenses, and those were, like we mentioned, the indirect, some of them, including parking and vehicles and telephones and office supplies and stuff. So personnel, we're going to dive deep into that. So there's fringe benefits and 403B if you're lucky to have that, staff development. There's also workman's comp insurance. And then, so those are just personnel expenses, but then there's payroll expenses and payroll taxes. So at the end of the day, you're going to spend $233,030 $233,030 plus $30. And then, so you're going to have 51,000 take home, almost 52,000. And that's, you don't want to budget a flat budget ever, because things could go either direction, right? So you want to budget for a profit in any program or your overall budget. Do what you can to do that. In this case, you'd want to roll it back into program, buying tools next year, or maybe a new truck, whatever it is. So that's an example of a budget. So the who, really think about who are the people, who are the individual staff positions that you'll have. And so I don't know, I always think of this song. So determine who will be on the ground planting, and maintaining your trees into the future. Right? Let's make a song. And so they're also behind the scenes staff and contractors. For example, you might have accounting, and and in-house or contract that out, but those might be indirect costs. Okay. Calculate the fully loaded staff hourly rate. And so we're going to dive into that. And do think about this opportunity to make sure your pay rate for all staff is looking like it should, because you're going to lose staff if your rates are substandard. So do some comparisons. There are local nonprofit, I think it's every like 2 or 3 or maybe 5 years, they put out a wage by your occupation. And so there are different documents to double check that. Okay. And don't forget about inflation. You're writing grants that are probably, you're not going to start work for a whole year. So think about what inflation has been looking like historically and put that in there. So I want to just, okay, here's an example of an office. You've got a lot of positions. At the whole year's payroll is looking like nearly $900,000. And right off the bat, you have payroll tax, which is 10%. So that's like $90,000. So that's just partially loaded there, meaning that's just part of what you're paying, an office is paying for each worker. The workman's comp can be such a challenging thing. I don't know who's had issues with that, but you want to make sure your class code is correct for all the employees that work for you. 1 or more employees, you need to have workman's comp insurance. Class codes might be, related really to if you're clerical, sitting at a desk during the day or out in the field doing work, planting or pruning trees. So this can add 8% plus to your individual salary cost. Plus, I say it really depends on what their class code is. So here's an example of a tree care staff just started. They're making $65,000 in your organization. Their rate is 10.22% for workman's comp, and you multiply that, it's an additional $6,600 onto their salary. So their salary just with the workman's comp alone is looking like $71,643. So we're looking at other costs. Healthcare, it really depends on every organization and what they're offering their staff. And office, also in the demographics of the staff, often healthcare plans will vary. So this could add to that entire payroll of $900,000, about 15% additional to that budget. Keep in mind, you really want to make sure there's some staff development going on. That's completely up to the management, but management should know that a trained staff who goes to workshops might go to get a certification. They're supporting that. Go to a conference, a ReLeaf conference, annual conference, and meet up with their fellow tree planters and workers. So this can add 2% or so to that individual salary. There might be a 403B that the employer contributes to, and that is varies by management. All this is really employee retention. It's all about employee retention and knowledge base. You want to make sure your employees are able and learn what they need to learn to do their job, and actually to train employees that you might start hiring, additional employees or other employees. So this is important. So when you fully loaded, summary might be that $65,000 a year person who's just beginning. Fully loaded might be a cost to the organization of $87,750. So 35% plus or minus, it depends. So think about that when you're putting budgets together. Another way to look at something is by program, payroll by program. So across the top in red are categories of programs, including tree care. In teal there, education, planting in green, advocacy, development, and administration. So, when you look at the staff role, there are 8 employees there. Some of them are 100% in tree care or planting, and some are a mixture. And it's important to kind of split them out and know what that cost is for for a department, for a program. So for instance, there are two 100% tree care people and some have miscellaneous tree care, but let's say, look at the planting here. In this pay period, this is one of 2 pay periods per month, $2,600 is going out for planting. And so in a month, about $5,000 is being spent just on direct payroll on planting. So you'll want to be invoicing grants and such for planting about $5,000 per month. And now we all know we don't plant throughout the year. So there'll be some months where you're not able to, and other months where you're billing out more than that because you're planting more trees. So just to keep in mind, there are fun ways to look at it by department, and that keeps you in check, thinking about your organization. So we talked a little bit, or I mentioned site conditions and the materials you use. It's really important to understand your sites and go to them in advance. So is your tree planting requiring concrete cutting? There are trunk guards. Do you need to pre-dig because it's so rocky? You need some help out there. You're going to be using mulch and maybe replacement mulch. Plan for that. Welded wire mesh. Do you have deer, or does it give extra protection of trees in a ball field? Hundreds of feet of hoses and hose reels. What are you doing? Think about it. Metal T-posts. You can't possibly drive a wooden post into some of these soils, the rocky soils I've seen. Replacement stakes. We're going to talk a little bit about replacement trees and stakes, but you're going to need additional stakes, gopher guards perhaps, watering bags. Some watering systems biodegrade in 18 months or so. So, if you're watering that tree for 3 years, you're going to need 2 bags per tree. And so are you planting trees in remote burn areas or in maintained turf areas? This will dictate some of those materials you're using for planting. And irrigation systems really may be the best solution if you can, get that in, and there's funding to pay for these systems. So get assistance in budgeting for them. And you're going to need to know a little bit more about the site and where the point of connection is and so forth. But materials, site conditions, got to be there. Got to see some of these sites. Tools are another item, and it's something you need to budget for and get some good numbers on. It completely depends on how many trees you're going to be planting on a single event. So let's say you have 120 trees you're planting on a Saturday morning. You want to have 15 groups maybe, planting 8 trees each. Okay, what's that look like? Well, you're going to need a lot of tools, right? This is kind of 2 round points per group and 1 flathead shovel, stake pounder and such. I'm not going to read them all off, but there are a lot of tools to consider. And also tools can help you limit the speed as a planting leader. Maybe your group is really like gung-ho and they're out there plugging trees in the ground well ahead of staking. Well, you want to slow them down. Having fewer tools sometimes is a way to for the planting leader to make sure that trees are being planted properly. So just think about that. Extra tools, put in your budget's additional tools, because inevitably some groups might need more, and to have them in the back of your truck to distribute is a good thing. So this was brought up yesterday in talking with ReLeaf, that some of you are budgeting for really inexpensive shovels or other tools. So if they're quality, great, but a lot of the inexpensive tools are not. You're going to break your shovel handle right off the bat. You're going to bend the head of your shovel. You're going to crack it. There's some cheap stuff out there. So make sure that you're looking at, not the lowest end, but something that's going to last you a few years, not just a single planting. Equipment is often a line item in some of our budgets. So how you're getting your water, if you're tapping into fire hydrants, you'll need a meter, and they're awfully expensive, but typically the meters are rented out by your water agency. So water meters might be something. Water tanks, are you filling tanks after you tap into that water meter and trucking them around? Because your trees are so far away from your point of connection at a site, you're going to actually need to drive and fill these containers up. Or say in a park, there's lots of water everywhere, but how do you tap into it? Quick couplers are a way to tap into a main line and screw in your hose, and suddenly you have water in different points around the park. So you're going to work with your parks people and whoever, or schools people. Schools also have main lines and quick couplers typically, and commercial sites actually too. Okay, so think about equipment. These things can cost you. Also, machinery. Some folks are renting machinery to dig their holes, or a little bobcat to dig holes. So think about what you need, get some pricing on it, and don't forget there's sometimes delivery expenses on these things. So build in that entire cost. And if you're just using it for a day or a week, see what works best. So that might be kind of fun to try out. And if you don't want to try them out, there are services that can do it. So look out there and get some pricing on, sometimes fencing companies have augers on the back of little trucks to be able to put fence posts in, but they work great for digging holes for trees. Keep in mind, in past webinars I've done, I've mentioned that if you're digging in heavy clay soils, an auger leaves a very clean side and makes it very difficult for tree roots to get into those sides. So just side note, you'll want to scarify or roughen up those sides if you're using an auger in heavy clays. Tree companies can deliver for free often because they want to get rid of their wood chip. They have chippers when they're doing pruning, and that wood chip is fantastic for mulching. And if you just set up with them a time and place to drop it, often it is available at no cost. So connect with the tree companies. And then if you can't and you need to pay for it, again, there are companies, soil yards that can deliver mulch and materials. So again, keep in mind there's a delivery cost, and sometimes the delivery cost is more than the product itself. So, but that's what you have to do. Make sure you budget for it. So you might need a contractor. You can't install all those main lines. That's your plan. You want to do it. But maybe your volunteers on planting day could connect the drip systems to that main line and be something on a planting day. It could be. Make sure your irrigation system is in before your planting day and protected. You know, sometimes the contractor might be delayed and suddenly you planted your trees. They said they would have it in before the planting and it's not in. So really get the watering available. Know that it's available. So the contractor might have to do it all, and that's just fine. Set it all up, but have them there during the planting day because things happen. Lines can break or just things adjusted. You have to relocate the tree or whatever because of an obstruction. So consider services like a landscape contractor. Okay, here's a polling question. And who have you asked about costs to help you budget materials and services more accurately? Like, who do you go to? These are not at the tip of our tongues. Arborist, you check with arborists, or the other tree planting organizations you've gone to in the ReLeaf network or outside the ReLeaf network. Landscape contractors. And sometimes if you have an in-house financial person, they can help you with some of the things you may have forgotten in a budget. Having another set of eyes on that is good, or other. So in the chat, and Megan, I think this one all goes in the chat as well.
It looks like we're going to have to keep going with the chat. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. It looks like we've got some responses, landscape contractors and tree care companies. 1 through 3, all of the above there.
Yeah. Okay. Anything off from, different, anything unique in there?
Tree nurseries.
Tree nurseries
from there,
okay,
which
absolutely.
is great. Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay.
Irrigation store. There's another one.
Yes, completely. Often the irrigation stores can do the contracting too. And so they really know the numbers, or they're selling to contractors all the time. Yeah, very good. Okay. So yeah, use your resources. Don't, think you got a handle of it. Get someone to check your work. Okay. So watering always comes up. I think at the very beginning, watering was something like to really know how best to water some of these sites. And there's always been Contract watering. Look at those watering trucks from 1939. I found this picture online. It's the Golden Gate International Expo in San Francisco. They did plantings all over, and this was a truck they used to water the plants. So not much different from today's watering truck there. But community watering has always been around, and that might be your best bet for doing certain plantings. And irrigation systems might be your best bet for doing other planting in other planting conditions. Think about it. Also, watering is something to think about programmatically. The bottom left is a truck that I put together with a blue tank in it. It has all the warning arrow boards and flashing lights and backup arrows. And anyway, it was something in pump systems and hose reels. And, by looking at what others are doing with watering trees on the back of their trucks, we put this together so that we can water our own trees. We were having problems on some sites where we weren't sure if we can get access to water on the planting day on a Saturday on certain sites. So also maybe residents aren't home and aren't able to water their tree or didn't leave their hose out even though we asked them to. But so this guarantees at the end of a planting, you just go around and water every tree that you've planted. If you notice the resident has done it, you move on to the next. But it's something to consider. And this might be a new program that you think about. Okay, could be a workforce development program. So watering, think about all the different ways. So at this point, you're beginning to look at this picture of the who, what, where, and how. And even I'm sure you're thinking about when. You got to think about when, because you're not planting trees in the dead of summer, likely, no matter where you are. So your planting seasons, when they are. So the who, what, where, and when. This is part of the picture. Right now, we're going to look at a kind of a typical budget where we have, if you look at the categories on the left, education personnel on trees. On the right, the grant request and matching funds. It isn't every grant that needs matching funds, but in some cases, we got to keep track of that. And actually, it is important to keep track of any match, any additional funds or products that have been given to your organization to help you plant trees, because that is part of the actual cost. Don't forget, the match is what you need to complete the project. So in this case, you got personnel, you have project management at a straight hourly, and some establishment care, monitoring and reporting, good, like that. Contract labor, they're planning on planting and irrigation installation help. So they're building that into the grant requests, looking like $46,000 into that category. Down below, we have trees, and I've put in green, highlight green, of replacement trees. They're planning for replacement trees, which is great. And that's in the matching fund category. So either they're just planting them themselves or going to buy them themselves. And that's they've got a lot of trees for replacement. Often it's about 5%. So if you have 200 trees you're planting, 10% is 20, 5% is 10 trees you might put in there for loss. But keep in mind, it depends on your site. If you're planting trees in some very challenging areas, you might increase that percentage. It's just a ballpark, saying 5%. Toggling down below, they're also doing other vegetation, supplies and materials. So it is also in that materials and supply category that you put your replacement stakes. If you're going to do replacement trees, you're probably going to need replacement stakes or materials, other materials that might break or rot or something. So make sure to include that. And again, it looks like they use the matching column to add something in there. So moving down to equipment, they're renting a Bobcat, storage container, and a lot of individual irrigation items. They're spelled out a little bit down there, which is kind of nice. So signage is something, it depends on your grant, and it depends on how many sites you're planting at. If you have multiple sites, you're not going to just buy one really pretty sign for one site. You're probably going to figure it out and have, maybe a sign that works for each of the sites. And it might not be that big, beautiful, pretty sign, but maybe a smaller sign that works for all the sites. Your administration project admin costs are not included in there. That's fine. Total direct is 94,000. They have matching funds of 7,000. And then indirect costs, it's really important to include these. Take advantage of those percentages. Sometimes they're 10, 12. I think it's important to take advantage of them because you do have these expenses that hit you month to month regardless. So volunteers in that match, that is huge. Look at how big this is against that whole budget. So include that, make sure you use it. The grantor will let you know what that hourly rate is. In this case, it's $29.95, but I think it's up to almost $32 now for 2023. But anyway, it's included. And where are we? So out of this whole grant, they're asking $100K, and they're going to match it with that. And so the total project, I can't see the bottom of my screen, but is almost 150K, right? So include that match. Don't forget it. It's how we share how much the project really costs, and that's good for ReLeaf to know. Tree planting and tree care success. We've talked about the who, the staff, materials, what's needed, the tools, and you're thinking about what you need for each condition. So you're really planning ahead. The special equipment, and can you even do this? Can you water all the trees? You're going to need a contractor to do it. Can you irrigate them with a system with your own staff? So services, you might be calling in a landscape contractor to install those irrigation systems. And what I really want to make sure to talk about today is that there is tree care that's important to a tree at a 3-year mark. They grow. Trees grow. You didn't know that. I just want to let you know. Some of the fast-growing species grow really, really quickly. They can quickly get out of hand. When you're planting a 15-gallon tree, generally you could use pruners and a step stool and do it, or prune it even before you put it in the ground if there's some issues. But think about the who and the what and the how. And the staff that are going to do it, what are your tools, and how are you going to do it? Tree survival rates will increase when you do some light pruning. You remove that codominant leader, some lower limbs, and you do checkups on the trees. In the first 3 years, it's important to do these. And these early corrections to a tree are made easily when the tree is smaller and young. And remulching your trees, if you didn't or weren't able to mulch at planting day, go back and mulch the trees, especially in some of these turf areas, and make that mulching as big as you can. And 3-4 inches is nice. Back it away from the trunk. So all your survival rates will increase when you do some of these things. Now, and I think it's important to collect some data on every tree. When, say, you're going back to remulch your trees, you're going to check your tree and see how they're doing, how healthy they are. So a minimum data collected on every tree, I think, is important, and gives you a sense on what direction your tree is going, or if you need to maybe come back and visit it sooner because it's suffering. So you're collecting data on your tree. And so stay accountable with every tree that you plant. And honestly, these services should and can be funded. Don't forget about that. Build them into your grants, your grant proposals. And actually, when you promote this to your funders, that you care for every tree that you plant, this is a huge promotion. It is something that really is important when you tell them that. So there are lots of options in how to get to prune all your trees. So your staff, if they're not trained, I think it's very important to train up your staff, take them to workshops or whatever, so that early tree care and pruning is something that they have full awareness of. And also the staff that don't, they could train those other staff, and that if they're all together watching how one person prunes a tree, they may have comments or ideas and share the best practices all together. So I think that's really a great way to do it. That's option A. Option B might be, do you have a youth tree care program? And is that something that the youth might be able to prune these young trees? So consider it. And, is this some program that you want to think about in the future? Is it where you want to go? Do you want to build it into a grant? So this is part of the dream. Think about your planning. Option C is an interesting one. There are often arborists that want to volunteer on the weekend and prune trees. So if they're able to lead a group of your volunteers that don't know as much, and they could quickly prune a young tree. They're so used to pruning these big trees, but coming out to prune smaller trees is the ones I've met have really enjoyed being with people and pruning the tree. And they also can gain perhaps clients, future clients on trees. So there's a benefit maybe for them. Dr. Larry Costello has been around for a bit, and he has some great how to prune young trees and videos out there. He was with the Cooperative Extension. He's retired, but a great resource is right there. Option D is you could contract this out. If you can't do it, you can't plan for it in the next couple of years with staffing and what all you're doing. Seek bids from companies that can prune your trees, and you give them a list and coordinates where these sites are, and they can do the work for you. So get bids. And then the other option, option E, is don't prune it all during the first 3 years and hope for the best. What do you guys think? I don't think that works at all. So, and it's clear it doesn't. Okay, I'm not going to cover that one. But so I did mention faster growing species. A couple of them are the evergreen elm, ulmus, and elm varieties. Lophostomen, the Brisbane box, and sycamores can grow super fast. So sometimes at 3 years, it's pretty darn hard to do a good job with reach pruners pruning a tree, and even ladders. So think about how you're going to do it, and at least plan for the tools, and kind of understand some of your species you plant to the extent of knowing how fast they grow or how wayward they grow. Sometimes elm are bolting all over, right and left, all branches, and really have to tip them back, bring them back into control almost annually. So I would say annually for the evergreen elm. So think about how you might capture these trees. Now, we know that trees can fail in the first 3 years for many reasons, and you really should budget for a 5% loss. So again, if you plant 200 trees, 10 trees are additional for a 5% loss on that. Budget for replacement stakes and other materials that might be needed when you're replacing a tree, or they might rot if you're using wooden stakes, or break, snap, and at school grounds, or you need replacement stakes. So really build in, and I just wanted to say there are some line items that you could, I don't want to say fluff, but you can put costs in that you anticipate. You're not really sure, but you might make them a little bit more, knowing that there's a soft spot in your budget that you could pull down if, my goodness, all the stakes at this one school, they're all broken. You're going to replace them all. That's a lot of staking. Or you might have very little stake loss at the school. And so, well, in that case, plant one more tree. It's important to put in these budget line items accordingly. So replacement watering bags or donuts or other systems, check and ask if you're buying them from a irrigation supply store or online, find out how long they last. They photodegrade easily, some of these materials. So know if you need to replace them or find a different material, something that'll work for the duration. So budget for them. Also, your staff and volunteers to plant replacement trees. Typically, they're random, very random replacements, right? There's 2 at this site, there's 1 over here, and you're crossing town and driving all over, spending a lot of time driving, doing replacements. So they're not the same as a typical tree planting with a lot of trees on a single site. So plan on how to do them efficiently. And then understanding that your watering cycle is off now. Say you're 2 years into your grant, your tree failed, and now you're planting again. Well, it's offset. You're going to need to water that tree for its first 3 years to ensure that it survives and maybe out of the grant period. Plan for it. As soon as you could get those replacement trees planted, the better within your grant cycle. And also, if you think about it, You know, you've gotten them, you've done your tree care post-planting visit and you've cut it. It's dead. It didn't survive the root pruning, and that is within a few months you could replace that tree. So it isn't as large a you know, extending your watering cycle. So those visits, post-planting visits and tree care visits are important. Yeah, and don't put your bags right against the tree. They can rot the tree. And just a side note here, put them on the stake, zip them up on the stake. Yes, so this was back in the day. And if that's me to the left, and that's our state governor, Gavin Newsom, when Gavin was mayor in San Francisco. If everyone has been around, remembers the '89 earthquake, the Loma Prieta, it caused grief with a lot of freeway structures. So the 101 traffic got dumped onto city streets, and what was designed was a Octavia Green. So this was a developer and city project where trees were planted, and it's a golden shovel moment where you get out your gold spray paint, make sure that shovel is painted gold, and you get a shot of the man. So that's when we all had wristwatches. Remember that? Okay. So budget to succeed, and put these numbers in the right line items and really think about it. Your tree survival and health will improve when you plan for tree care. So grow as a company, and build your programs with good budgets. So I think we have some time for questions. I do want to thank you and thank ReLeaf for having me today. So questions and ideas, also takeaways. Love to hear from everybody.
Hey, thank you, Doug. Thank you so much. There were some questions in the chat, Alex. If you want to take over, and folks, if you've got questions now, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered. Thanks.
Sure. So we had a question pretty early on about the best way to hardwire tree care into municipal budgets. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think cities should be aware that you can't just plant a tree and leave it. So I had a couple of green boxes that if you begin pruning trees and visiting trees, that is a huge selling point to your program. Say the city is aware and contracts with your organization to plant trees. Knowing that you prune them also is a burden off their back, right? You exist because the city is happy to have help planting trees and also happy to have help caring for the trees. I think just sharing the importance of tree care, how you do that, is that the question? How you, I think you
how to get it, I think how to get it in the budget so that it's, you know, this is for tree care rather than just, you know, going somewhere else.
I think looking at your tree care budget, I was talking to ReLeaf yesterday, and it was a surprise that it's not expensive to start a tree care program. It's quite the opposite of a tree planting program. If you think about planting trees, the cost of the tree, the concrete cutting if you have it, augering, other services to get the tree in the ground, there's a lot of expenses that you don't have in tree care. It's having the tools and the staff, and starting small. Build that budget of what you'd like to have your tree care program do. If it's only pruning half your trees or whatever the starting point is. And put in a grant for it, find other grants if your city's not able to, but your city should recognize its importance. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so we also had, is there a typical range of percentage overhead for labor?
Overhead. Well, I was talking about a 35%, which would include healthcare and different taxes and different benefits. So I would say 35%, and work with your organization and to find what those are. And again, workman's comp could be a huge number, and get some bids, and you should broker it out to get bids for workman's comp insurance.
And then we also had kind of what data points would you collect? That one was answered in the chat, but I just wanted to shout it out for people that we had a webinar earlier in the year on tree monitoring, which was fantastic.
Right.
And we'll have more to share about that once we get our tree inventory tool up and running. So
Woohoo. Yeah, check out that webinar at data points. Yeah, it covers all of them. And these, Alex, these are posted on ReLeaf's website as links in education.
I know they're on the YouTube channel. Megan, are they also on the
Okay.
website?
They are on our website. We have, I can share them here as well as in a follow-up email following this presentation. So you have a direct link. So we have it on our website and our YouTube channel, yes.
Well, one quickie, data points. I think health monitoring is something to collect, right? And is the tree there or is it gone? So, has it been killed or is it struggling? Different categories of health. I think that way you could come back later and say, oh, our trees are improving, or like I got to go back there next month and make sure it's okay. So health monitoring is a big data point.
Do you recommend doing soil analysis before a planting?
If you think it's in a challenging site, I think of bay edges along our San Francisco Bay and Bay Fill. They might be, have a lot of salt in them. I think it could be worth it if you have a significant number of trees going on one site that doesn't have any vegetation, may not have any sort of base points for you to know. And again, I think of baylands as part of that. So yeah, I recommend it for certain sites that you think are questionable.
Okay, have you ever built a trailer with a water bladder on it? Do you have any experience with that?
Well, no, a truck with a tank on it. So I would think conceptually it's the same but smaller scale, because a trailer probably can't handle as large a tank. So it's just a Briggs and Stratton motor and hose reels. And I really recommend looking at companies and cities and people that spray down sidewalks have the great system, to water trees, honestly. So you could do gravity fed. It's just slower, right? You don't need a motor. You could just drain your tank and it's just a bit slower. And often time is money, right? So add an engine and put some gas into it. So I think looking at existing examples in your city would be good.
And then we had a couple questions about staking. Do you have a particular system that you recommend, and when do you recommend removing the stakes so that they don't interfere with the tree's growth?
Yeah, I'm still a fan of the wooden stake because you can manipulate them using 3 stakes to make kind of a protective cage around your tree with cross braces, wooden plywood braces. Is that structure that gives movement within movement of the tree within that triangle. And you could attach wire mesh for extra protection. And then as your tree grows, you could cut the tops of the stake. You could leave the enclosure low where it's not rubbing against the tree, just as additional protection. You could cut the stake a little lower if your side branch is hitting it. Just cut it. I think metal stakes are a little problematic. I always like the sound of them lasting forever, and you could reuse them, but I haven't really seen that work too well. So wooden stakes I rather like. If you're in rocky conditions and can't drive a stake in, the metal T-posts are fantastic. It's just a bear to get them out. There are ways to pry them out, but they might stay in there for a while. And they're expensive.
I think we tried those metal stakes at Zach Tree, and just with the logistics of recovering them, it didn't work out.
Yeah. Same.
And we probably have time for one more question. So Alex, do you want to give Doug one more before we end our program today?
Sure. Have you ever used smart irrigation controllers for large public plantings? What do you think about that?
Oh, cool. So I would assume that would be sensors in the ground that pick up. So if it's rain, they shut off, they shut down if there's enough moisture in them. I've spec'd them in projects before. I know about them. I guess what's the question about them? Meaning, do they work? I think they're almost required in some large projects. Basically, smart systems are required. So I don't know specifically what the question is, but I would use them and find out from an irrigation supply store what's working well these days.
Well, thank you so much, Doug, for your time today. How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to reach out and talk with you?
Sure. Yeah, at the bottom of my screen, I had my email and phone number. Yeah, welcome to give me a call and reach out.
Okay, great.
It's on the first and last screen, I think.
Great. So we will be sharing this recording, and then in the follow-up email for everybody who registered, I'll include your email as well. And it'll also be posted on our website in case folks have additional questions or they want to reach out. Thank you again. And thank you to the California ReLeaf staff who joined us and helped, including Alex with the question and answer. We really appreciate your time. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for attending, and we'll be in contact soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.